If you like my work, you may want to consider to support me on Patreon. You can also follow me on Twitter. Links in the description below. Well then, season 1 of the Owl House ended after just 19 episodes. It is just me, or is that a kinda weird number to end the season? Like, it doesn't have to be 26, but seriously, couldn't you have at least screened it in even 20? This just triggers my OCD. Well, if you stuck around and watched my first 2 videos on the Owl House, you may know that I took a liking to the show, and yeah, over the season it certainly was a lot of fun to watch. Though at the same time I didn't really feel any particular need to do any specific episode discussions. The episodes were good for the most part, can't really think of anything I disliked, and maybe that's it. I really haven't had any problems either, which aren't borderline nitpicking, or maybe stuff that kinda gets evened out. Perhaps the chief example for that is Amity. Like, it just kinda feels off how fast I dealt with her bully phase. She was the uptight, arrogant elite witch who looked down on others, but 3 episodes later she already becomes friends with Luz. It just seems like they kinda rushed the bully turned friend thing. But on the flip side, you know, the character type gets rather old fast if not handled properly, and it prevented that Amity does something so nasty that it would undermine any attempt to quote-unquote redeem her. Something lots of other cartoons tend to struggle with, so that evens out. Also, I guess I have to give the show some credit. Amity is a rather major character who is rather obviously in love with Luz. We don't know if she actually feels the same, but yeah, step in the right direction, and you gotta admit.
What about you, Amity?
Me? On a team with you? Running around in cute uniforms? Sweating? I gotta go!
Huh. Well, I guess she's out. In any case, let's get training!
This one is just funny. Now if the show actually grows the same balls as Kipo and drops the G word, then we can actually applaud it.
I think I like you.
Oh. Oh.
You don't feel the same.
Oh, no, I like you too. Really, really like you. You're all kinds of awesome, but you should know something.
You like me as a friend?
Yes, because I'm gay.
You should definitely go and watch Kipo, it's a pretty good show. Now that I think about it, a show about witches that live in the demon realm and are gay. Ha! Those conservative Christians must hate this show. Anyway, after that it just feels like the show could have done a bit more with Amity in general. After she became friends with Luz, it just feels that she got a bit sidelined and her entire character suddenly revolves around her having a crush on Luz. To the point that I would describe her as a borderline satellite love interest. Made only worse by the fact that she didn't really get much interaction with the rest of the main cast. But the show does seem to be on the right track in that regard for season 2, after they established her past relationship with Willow. Even that episode barely has her interacting with Willow directly either, but at least opens up the possibility of them actually fixing their friendship and make her a proper part of Luz's friend group. So that's pretty neat. Another thing that came a bit short in my opinion was Hexai. Frankly, I expected the school to play a bigger part in the show. Basically, I thought the show would finally fill my desire for a Harry Potter cartoon.
You can only pick one of the 9 tracks. And you do not want to embarrass me in front of the inspector.
But all the tracks are so cool.
Is there some sort of enchanted article of clothing that could sort this out for me?
Well, there used to be, but...
Oh, I'm so excited!
And now, I feed!
That one is probably my favorite joke in the entire season. It just cracks me up every time. Anyways, the show devotes an entire episode to it that Luz is probably better off getting taught by Ida and not to follow the rules of the school, which we learn later are rather strict. But then it goes back on that and Luz gets enrolled in it, only to highlight it during the first day why it might have not been the best option. And well, after that we don't really get to see if Luz actually learned something there. And at the end of season 1 it's sort of impossible for her to attend that school in the future. Dunno, it just feels like the show just couldn't quite make up its mind on that front. In the episode's the first day we get a bit of an introduction that a witch is only allowed to learn one type of magic, but we don't get the answer to why until the season finale.
Bellows said that mixing magic was wrong, that only he had that right. So he created the Coven system. And there our knowledge was restricted, and our potential sealed away. those who resist are called wild witches, and they face harsh punishment. Emperor Belos has since retreated into his castle. There are whispers that say he's planning something big. I wonder if catching Ida was part of his big plan. What do you think, Luce?
Like, don't you think this might have been an important information to bring up, because suddenly it's established that it is actually forbidden to mix magic under threat of petrification, and that makes Principal Bum's decision to allow Luce and the other troublemakers to enroll several tracks at once rather questionable. In the episode itself, it just comes off as an arbitrary school rule, not something that gets enforced by the Emperor's Coven. This is an explanation why Luce wouldn't have been able to enroll at all courses, and Bum surely has to know that. It is a rather minor plot contrivance, but it just feels odd that it didn't came up right there, and it would have lifted some of the burden the finale had to carry. Just replace King's voiceover with a voiceover from Bum's, and you could have easily inserted that explanation for why a witch is only allowed to study one kind of magic right in this episode. And that's arguably the biggest flaw of the show. It didn't do a lot of legwork in preparation for the season finale. It could have established some plot points better beforehand and maybe a bit more foreshadowing. I mean, there's quite a bit of that too, but not much is paid off this season finale. This, however, doesn't mean that I'm against the episodic nature of the show. Heck, I actually learned to appreciate that form of storytelling a lot more after seeing so many shows failing at a serialized story. The fact that most episodes can stand on their own as their own fun stories is arguably one of its biggest strengths. All episodes are fun and not dragged down by focusing too much on just setting up stuff for future episodes. Setting up stuff for future episodes is great, but if an episode can't stand on its own and the setup fails to deliver, it just becomes a slog to sit through, and there's always an issue that one bad decision can drag your entire show down. So it's sometimes better not to rely too much on a myth arc. So yeah, I think the show could have done a bit more setup for the season finale, but I don't think that the season suffered from it, cause hey, the episodes we got were all pretty damn great. So yeah, while I think that this is arguably the biggest flaw of the show so far, it's a rather minor one. Besides that, the show just has some really fun characters and lots of good comedy that is often hilariously dark. I mean, that's what I like about the show the most. It makes fun at fantasy stories and comes with a rather twisted sense of humor, and that sort of humor is right down up my alley. And I guess here's where we get to the meat of things. How did this season end? Well, the season finale consisted of 2 episodes. Not quite a two-parter, they were aired a week apart after all, but yeah. The Agony of a Witch and Young Blood Old Souls. We learn that Ida's curse is getting worse and Hexite is going on a school trip to the Emperor's castle. In the meantime, Lilith tries to capture Ida, and we learn that she wants Ida to join the Emperor's coven cause Emperor Belos promised her to cure Ida's curse if she does. She fails. Luce learns from Willow that there is an artifact at the Emperor's castle that according to legend can cure any sort of curse, so she instead steals to help Ida. Willow and Gus decide to help her, but then they get corked by Lilith, who takes Luce hostage and sends Willow and Gus to Ida to lure her out. They have a duel and... Okay, here I just want to point out that I just really love the action scenes in this show, and this scene in particular is simply cool to watch with great animation. Very anime, I'm into it. Lilith also has a slip of the tongue and reveals that she was the one who cursed Ida in the first place. Lilith forces Ida to use up all her magic by putting Luce into danger, which results in Ida losing control over her curse, and Luce has to go home defeated. In Young Blood Old Souls, Luce decides to rescue Ida. The Emperor meanwhile reveals to Lilith that he never intended to cure Ida and instead wants to turn her into a statue, as this is a punishment for wild witches. He also reveals that he isn't really interested in Ida in particular, as it has been implied up to this point, but rather wants her ported to the human world. Well, it might also be used to travel to other worlds, we don't know. At least Belos tells us later that he isn't interested in the human world. Luce manages to get inside the conformatorium by committing some crime.
We'll have to do something so diabolical, so criminally insane, that they'll have to send us to the conformatorium.
Hey!
Hmm?
What? Yep. Perfect plan.
and easily breaks out and gets to Ida, who gives her the key to the portal. At which point I want to ask, does no one check if any of the prisoners have anything on them? I mean, if Belos had bothered to search Ida, he would have gotten his hands on the portal, and Lou's plan to get inside only worked cause no one searched her and took her glyphs away. Well, and even then, how is it that Luz can beat several members of the Emperor's Coven so easily? Even if we assume that Luz has a natural aptitude to magic, despite being a human, and that her glyph magic is more powerful than the magic of an average witch, I do find it a bit contrived. The show went to great lengths to establish that joining the Emperor's Coven is a great privilege reserved for the most talented witches on the boiling Isle, and they only accept a certain number of new recruits. So getting inside the Coven itself is rather hard in the first place. They are the best of the best. Not to mention that they are the only Coven that is allowed to use all types of magic, yet the show treats them as disposable mooks. There are dozens of them and they are barely a threat. Now this is a narrative dissonance. These masked witches that get easily defeated shouldn't be part of the Emperor's Coven. You can keep those enforcers and say that they serve the Emperor's Coven, but as much as they are hyped up, there should just be very few of them, and each one should be a powerful witch that can give Ida a run for her money. Basically, if this was a shonen anime, they would be a small group like the Shichibukai in One Piece, the Akatsuki in Naruto, the Espada in Bleach, you get it. A very small exclusive group of distinct characters which you pull out for awesome boss battles, or at least they should be elite mooks and not that disposable. Anyway, after that, Ida gives Luz the portal and tells her to leave, and then gets brought to her execution. Then Luz gets approached by Lilith. As Lilith tries to explain herself and that she wants to help, Luz attacks her, they fall through the portal, and as it turns out, Luz glyphs magic doesn't work in the human world. So Lilith finally gets the opportunity to talk with her. She tells Luz that she cursed Ida because they were supposed to do each other to get into the Emperor's Coven, and since she knew she couldn't defeat Ida in a fair duel, she wanted to rig it by taking away her magic temporarily, unaware that the curse would last indefinitely. In particular bad since Ida just decided to throw the duel anyway, making the curse rather pointless to boot, and now she wants to make up for her mistakes. Well, and I suppose here's where we talk about the redemption of the week. And as far as villain redemptions goes, this one's pretty good actually. It doesn't come out of left field, since while there was a strong sense of rivalry between Ida and Lilith, Lilith wanted Ida to join the Emperor's Coven from the very beginning.
You shouldn't even be here. You're a wanted criminal. Unless... I don't believe it. You're here to join the Emperor's Coven.
In your dreams.
You think being covenless makes you so much smarter than everyone else. But while you run from the law like a degenerate, I'm mentoring the next generation of powerful witch students into the world.
I think this is important to keep in mind. While they were at odds, they established in their first appearance that Lilith cares about Ida, and they carried through all of her appearances. They even agreed on a sport match. Her cursing Ida was a moment of weakness that she regrets ever since, and she hopes that Belos would lift the curse if Ida joins. The only actual evil thing she did was taking Luz hostage and using her as a shield during that duel, and seemingly trying to kill her. Though, as she said herself,
Human, that orb was for your protection.
she put her in a bubble since she had no intention of harming her. She used her to manipulate Ida, but it was a calculated risk since she knew that Ida wouldn't let Luz come to harm. She might have been willing to impale Luz on those spikes, or maybe she wouldn't have let it go that far if Ida didn't save Luz. We don't know. That one was admittedly rather ruthless indeed, but the audience can tell that it came from a place of desperation. So yeah, it's not really that much of a redemption story since Lilith wasn't really that much of a villain to begin with. An antagonist for sure, but she didn't really cross any lines where I would say, nah, I don't buy it. Also, this helps.
I know how to rescue Adolin, but I can't do it alone.
How do I know I can trust you? Albert, you're okay. All right, Lilith. I don't like your whole deal, but we need your help to save Ida.
Thank you.
It clearly shows that Luz hasn't really forgiven Lilith. She is rather wary of her, but she also sees that if she wants to save Ida, she will need her help. So yeah, overall, they handled it pretty well so far, and they avoided most of the traps a lot of redemption stories fall into. So they go back through the portal, but are immediately caught by Emperor Belos. Lilith and King are brought to Ida to be petrified alongside her, while the Emperor wants to talk with Luz. Luz, however, has none of that and tries to fight him. He plays along for a bit and toys with her.
I'll play.
What's wrong, human? I thought you wanted to fight.
And here's a point where I talk about Emperor Ballas. While I think that he could have needed a bit more build-up, he surely doesn't disappoint. He is not only mysterious, he is also a scary and imposing figure, and incredibly powerful. He clearly doesn't take the fight with Luz seriously, yet manages to terrify her. Also, I really love his throne room with the giant beating heart. That guy is scary and I love scary villains. I might rip him off for a D&D campaign someday. And then there's the question about him talking with a dead titan on which society lives. Can he really listen to it? Is he lying? Is he mad? We don't know yet, nor do we know what his goal is. He still can carry the episode with pure intimidation, and you want to see him defeated since he very much oppresses the witches with his coven system. He doesn't need to be more, he can just be the evil witch who oppresses everyone. So yeah, I liked him. Also, he might be Sans.
I like your spirit.
He eventually gives Luz an ultimatum. He lets her go and save Ida if she gives him the portal key. I think this is another interesting distinction. He doesn't just let Ida go, he allows Luz the opportunity to save her, most likely not expecting that she would actually succeed. Well, Luz reluctantly agrees, but sucker punches him by booby-trapping the portal with some flame glyphs, which does manage to distract him for a bit. Luz gets to Ida, Lilith and King, and together they manage to escape. The Emperor, however, manages to twist the story to still make an example out of Ida.
My liege!
Children of the Isles, the Titan has told me to spare the Owl Lady's life, but in return, her curse will strip away all her powers. Let her monstrous form be a lesson about the dangers of wild magic.
Well, Luz, King and Ida return back to the Owl House, where Lilith is using a pain-sharing spell that was previously established in their flashback to transfer half of the curse onto her, which allows Ida to turn back. However, Ida is still not capable of using magic, and Lilith's magic is weakened as well. This is a very nice scene to emphasize that Lilith wants to make up for her past mistakes and to finally take responsibility for her actions. Luz tells Ida that they can learn more about Lilith's magic together, and the season ends on a hopeful note, only to show that Emperor Ballas is trying to reconstruct the portal and use it as a core for what seems to be a giant machine, probably an interdimensional portal. He maybe wants to compare notes with Ford from Gravity Falls. And I guess this is a good point to wrap things up. The first season of The Owl House was pretty great. I enjoyed pretty much all episodes and the season finale was pretty good as well. I wouldn't say that it blew my mind, but everything came together rather nicely in the end, and yeah, I really like Emperor Ballas as a villain. He just has the right creep factor to him. What bothers me a little bit is that the new status quo sort of prevents Luz from going to Hackside, which is a bit of a shame cause I would have liked to see more Hogwarts shenanigans, but okay. I do think it was a good way to raise the stakes that Luz had to sacrifice her only way home and is now stuck in this witch world. This is admittedly something that I found a bit odd from the very beginning, that Luz always had the option to just go back home. A bit untypical for this kind of story. But I'm really curious how things will continue in Season 2. I hope we don't have to wait for too long. But what about you? What are your thoughts on the first Owl House season? Did you like it? Anything that bothered you? Do you like my new look? Let me know in the comments below, or whatever else you want. Comments help with the algorithm and makes it so more people can actually see my videos, so it wouldn't be much appreciated. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're at it. Also, if you want to be really awesome, you can support me on Patreon. I just commissioned this new set of poses that tell you they ain't come cheap. If you need to hear more of my random fox, you can also follow me on Twitter. Anyway, I'm Tricky Fox. Stay foxy.
Sly as a fox, you got me under your spell. But you know I'll never tell that I know you know so well. Some